So this is a test. I want to know if I'm streaming. All right, good. So you should hear me and see me. Very good. All right, so we are back. I had a problem with technology. You know, I'm very close to having all my equipment work all the time, but that's just not the case right now. So I've already done the show. I'm going to do it again. So this time you'll hear me. You're welcome. A lot of people want me to talk about the Robinhood and GameStop, but I'm not going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about the Poor People's Campaign. They're kind of tied. I just want you to know one thing for sure. The GameStop debacle is not about us. We want to think it's about us, and maybe we can get a little nut, and maybe we can turn our $500 into $1,000 or turn our $500 into $5,000, but that's still not what this is about. It's not about that's not the way to community uplift. Bitcoin will not save us. Dodge will not save us. Your little money, even when you doubled, is still little money. What that it's actually doing is it helps people in the suburbs who have their Mimas and their Papas, trust funds, so that they can turn their $40,000 into, $120,000. You triple $40,000, it's real money. You triple your $5,000, it's kind of money. Now, let's be honest. You don't have $5,000 you can lose. You're talking about $1,000 or $1,500, and your $1,500 isn't enough to actually. You could quadruple that, and you'll still have huge problems. Because at $4,500, that's still not enough money to make the kind of moves you need to make, right? So the GameStop and AMC, sure, buy it if you can, but it's not about us. It's about other people taking out other white people. What we need is an actual campaign that will secure our community. I get my main money from a job, not my stocks, a job. So we need black people working good jobs at fair wages, and then they could, play the stock market on the side. But it's gambling when we don't have the kind of spare money to lose. And even if we win, it's not going to be enough money to actually make moves. So we can watch it like you watch a television show, but just know, and you can even participate in it. But fundamentally, it's not about us. It's about power. So we should watch how they shut it down. How Robinhood, a stock trading firm whose whole brand is around how you democratize stock day trading, has decided that it's inconvenient to have so many winners, and more importantly, it's inconvenient to have so many hedge fund losers, right? And this is actually a good segue to my problems with Barber and the Poor People's Campaign. Reverend Barber leaves Poor People's Campaign. I think he's leading into the toilet. I do not have a strong sense that will ever secure black people what we need to be made whole. And there are a few things, and I've thought this for a while, but I saw an interview with him and I did this, I thought this after reading the book, The Moral Awakening of America, the book he wrote on the Poor People's Campaign. But even during COVID, the first thing he said is, all right, so we're going to protest still, but it's going to be safe because we have to do everything we can safely. And safety is the first matter. That means you're just not serious about getting it done because the people you're fighting don't think safety, either yours or their own safety, is the first thing, the most important issue. So if you think safety first and your enemy doesn't think safety first, that means you work for them because they're going to do anything to make sure that you work for them, right? So the people who took out the reopen people who were like, no, we want to reopen our little business, they weren't thinking safety first. The people who stormed the Capitol building, they weren't thinking safety first. But you're telling me a Poor People's Campaign is going to take the safety first attitude and turn that into economic security and power? No. Not going to happen. Second thing, Barber, so the whole ethic of safety first activism is ludicrous. Even King knew that nonviolence was just nonviolence on your end. You're going to have to get beaten down publicly for it to work. There need to be cameras around. You can't just get beaten down in the dark of the night. That doesn't work. You need to get beaten down publicly for it to work. So safety was never going to be first. Right. My second problem with Barber is his leadership of the movement is that he's not actually willing to take down Democrats or anyone in particular. He doesn't name names except for Trump and take them down. When really you need to be able to show that you can make your allies lose, especially if your allies are company Democrats, because they don't care. They're indifferent to you. They've proven themselves indifferent. They work for the bankers who want to kick you out. Kamala Harris works for your land developer, not you, right? So you need to be willing to take out Democrats and not just campaign for a handful of ones you like. Generally, you need to take out the class you don't. And if you're not willing to do that, you're just not serious, right? So part of autonomy or independence is being able to negate your oppressors, right? So if the person you're fighting has designs on you and your life and you can't negate their plans, then that means you're just a tool for their plans because their plans involve you, right? So, and you need to talk in these terms. You need to be able to make Democrats lose as well as maybe make them win. But if you can't make them lose, then you're just a tool for, the person who can make Democrats lose, because that's a person the company leadership will talk to, right? So, and the third thing is just the fights he picked. He wants, healthcare is important. I believe in universal healthcare. I think everyone should be able to go see a doctor and dentist when they need to see a doctor and dentist. That's not the same as power. You can have healthcare and still be a slave, right? So you don't want longer life in a degraded condition. You want actually power in your life. So we have an underdeveloped notion of poverty that's just tied to material sustenance when we should peg it to power. Because if you empower the poor, they'll figure out how to get their own health care and, the material stuff taken care of, right? So you need to think in terms of power, not just health. The problem, you don't end poverty by being indifferent to power. You end poverty by empowering. So if you're talking about ending poverty, but you're not always talking about the conditions of empowerment, then you're not serious about ending poverty. It'll just move to a different kind of degradation. Or you're just working with a fundamentally underdeveloped notion of poverty, of poverty, right? So we need people to have secure jobs. Like at the end of the day, you're not going to make your money off GameStop. You're going to make your money off your job. We need black people. That's us, right? So we need a federal job guarantee, $22 an hour, $22 an hour, doing the cultural and physical infrastructure that we need to actually thrive in this life. We can get class sizes down to 10, whatever it takes. And we can create the money to do that. And you can say, well, all of our jobs are going online, or all of our jobs are outsourced. Yeah, that's just not true. There's about 60 years of deferred maintenance in Georgia. You can just put every black guy you wanted, could do work for 60 years just to get the state up. I'm in Athens right now, about 15 miles in any direction except directly towards Atlanta. The internet gets dicey and the water gets a little bit brownish, especially if there are a lot of black people communicating. So there's 60 years of deferred maintenance in Georgia. And Georgia, the weather's nice, right? So if you actually do the deferred maintenance and fix the physical and cultural infrastructure, people will move here and the GDP of the state will go up. But don't tell me that all of the jobs are going away. It's just that the people who need the services you don't care about. You don't care if elder community or well checks for black people. Those people just, grow old and die on their own with their house leaded with lead in it, and they're lead in their water and lead in their paint falling down around them. They even have a house, right? So it's not the case that the work is gone. It's the case that the work that needs to get done, we can't afford it on the private market. So we just live in ramshackle dwellings, and it's prohibitively priced on the private market, and we don't prioritize it getting done for black people. Right? So we need a notion of poverty that's not just tied to material sustenance, but also tied to the exercise of power, that's family, social, and political power on a par with others. And until we get that, even if we have a little bit of money, we'll still be poor because we don't have power. or living a degraded poor life. You can have, there's that book, $40 Million Slaves, about the professional athletes who are still not empowered. And, this is why people talk about why Curt Flood was so important. And I might do a whole show on Curt Flood because I just found out about him last year. And it turns out that, before Flood was a Major League Baseball player, before he sued, pretty much your team owned you. And these team owners were not particularly great people, like Marge Schott and all these people. Like, these were not great people who pretty much owned you. And if you wanted to play baseball, you would have to play for them on their terms, right? So that's not, you might have money, but you don't have power. So we need to talk about poverty in a way that's actually through power, not just through a little bit of extra money, right? That's not through actual democratization of power. So yeah, Curt Flood sued for free agency, and now we have free agents where you can get drafted, but you have options. The team doesn't own you in perpetuity. You can put yourself on the market to be drafted and sold to other teams, right? Of your own agency. You're free. We have free Negroes in the NBA and Major League Baseball because of Curt Flood, right? So you go look that up. Maybe that should be the next Disney Pixar black biopic, the Curt Flood story. There's a pretty good documentary on it, but I could see it for a treatment because if you have an impoverished notion of what it is to be a slave, then you're thinking, well, all my life I wanted to play baseball. I'm playing baseball now. I must be free. But actually, it's not that simple. There are lots of ways to be a slave, right? So we need the kind of economic security that secures political independence. Because if you go, it's hard to organize black people for a variety of reasons, but one of them is our jobs are real fragile. And they're usually working for white people. So if they get loud, then, they don't want bumptious Negroes around. Last in, first out. So just keep your mouth shut and go and collect your check. So you economically secure us with something like federal job guarantee. You'll find out we have political ideas that we've just been holding to ourselves. So that's, when was the last time you actually... I don't know. Black people, our notion of freedom in white America is really distorted, right? I'm probably one of the freest Negroes just because I can talk like this on YouTube. By the way, if you like the way I talk and you think I should talk like this more, go ahead and go to www.thefunkyacademic.com, kick in $5, $15, or $50 a month because, depending on who you talk to, I'm making myself downright unemployable. And depending on who you talk to, I'm downright unelectable. Although I don't know if that's the case. I think I can move to a black district and run for Congress in 10 years, and you guys will have my back. And maybe let me finish this PhD and we'll talk about that. So, but if you want this to grow, go to www.funkyacademic.com and kick in $5, $15, or $50 a month. And I can have a marketing budget and producer and make that happen. And actually grow the kind of wisdom I deliver once a week for, free. But, I can stabilize that. I can do it once a week. But right now we're just vulnerable. So you can't talk about addressing poverty without talking about, democratizing power. If you try to talk about addressing poverty without empowerment, then you're just creating more comfortable slaves, slightly more comfortable slaves, because they still won't say no to you or actually be able to make moves of their own agency. They're not self-determining. They just happen to not be hungry right now. That's not freedom. That's still a kind of poverty. It's just it's a spiritual poverty, or poverty that's not necessarily tied to material sustenance immediately, but it's tied to the instability of rights. You're not poor when you can actually make moves with other people who themselves can also make moves. You can work with them from a position of strength, and they're strong, and you can work together. That's what a real poor people's campaign looks like. We're trying to empower people. And so anytime you're talking about healthcare is great, right? So people should have healthcare. That's fine. Healthcare is not empowerment. Now, I will say that health bill is debilitating, But health care is not empowerment. In the same way that student loan forgiveness is not empowerment. Because there are a lot of Negroes with degrees who can't get good jobs and still be black. I mean, how many jobs have how many times have I been offered to speak and then people are like, yeah, we wanted a smart black guy and you seem great, but we want like the Jonathan Capehart version of you. Can we get, another Negro who doesn't make white people feel uncomfortable? And I say, no, you get me. So am I free? Really? I don't know. In America. So we need the quality of economic stability that allows for political independence on and off the job. Right? And so, yeah, we need to talk about reparations. We need to be clear about the reparations in terms of asset transfers. We need land, and not just the land that you guys have polluted. We need land, like good land that I pick. Right? We need to talk about white terrorism. We need to... Barber wants a poor people's campaign that doesn't make white people feel bad about the legacy of whiteness. White people need to feel bad about the legacy of whiteness in America because it's an awful legacy. It's a legacy of terrorism and violence and standing terror. So, I don't understand how you could be serious about a racially justice-tinged poor people's campaign, but then not be honest about the terror that is infused in American whiteness. And the low-key sociopathy. Someone mentioned that there might not be a white version of Real Talk. There might not be a white version of Keeping It 100 because their lives are so shot through with lies that there is no, they don't keep it 100 with each other. They keep it 75. And then Donald Trump was provocative because he was keeping it 80. He raised the ceiling. They don't keep it 100. They don't do Real Talk. Their whole lives are just lies told to other people who they expect to lie to them. There is no real talk in white America. And that's a problem if you actually care about justice. They don't keep it 100. Not even amongst themselves. They're just lying. So they're lying about where their money came from, or lying about how much their parents helped them out, or their inheritance, or just lying about where that letter of recommendation came from, lying about how they were selling their ass somewhere else. They're just lying. So there is no keeping it 100 with these people because I don't think they have that kind of concept because the entire nation is built on a quality of terror, by them, right? So. And unless you're being honest about that, then you can't fix it because you can't get justice for poor people and still be casual about the truth. Right? So, yeah. And let's be honest, if white people kept it 85, not even 100, they kept it 85, we'd find out we're in a nation full of sociopaths. And that's if they actually were honest to 85. So I'm just telling you how it is, and where we're at. And you shouldn't have to hear it from me. You should hear this from Barber, right? So you can't have a poor people's campaign. So if there are any takeaways from this, you can't have a poor people's campaign that is distinct from an empowerment campaign in America. No, it can't be just about biological needs to live. It has to be securing power and self-determination. That means economic security. That means asset transfers. That means empowerment on the job because we live in an industrial economy and not everybody's going to be a job owner, an owner. We need people who are workers, but we need black people to be treated like employees and not just slaves. As far as Barber, when Barber talks about this, he's like, well, we need to strike down all anti-union legislation. That's not enough. You can't just strike down anti-union legislation. You need to mandate every shop with over 50 people is going to be unionized. There's going to be a worker, even sector-wide workers that the management's going to have to bargain with, right? And you can have it doing sector-wide. Like we need black people working $40 and $50 an hour jobs, like working class people in Iowa were or Ohio were in the 80s. That shouldn't be too much. We need those jobs in South Carolina. And that was just because we had the white people in Ohio were entitled white people and they fought for what they fought for. So It's not the worst thing to work for somebody, but we just need to be employees and not slaves. And we need the economic security that then allows for political independence. And without that, we're just some man's boy. We're just tools, or like kind of hangers on and hoping that I don't know, someone doesn't lose a move. How many of you guys in the chat work in the private sector? Private sector, I've always had government jobs. I've worked a little bit in the private sector. I've had a lot of jobs, right? So I have had private sector jobs, but they've always been like low level. I've had a lot of jobs. But I just like the private sector, people just get fired for being mouthy. And I'm actually a little bit suspicious of any black man who hasn't been fired from the private sector for standing up for black people. Because if you're in the private sector, you're going to have to stand up for black people. And if you're not standing up for black people, then you're standing on them. So that's what I'm thinking. Federal job guarantee, because you can, and Barber talks about the minimum wage up to 15. Look, the minimum wage is always zero if you can't get a job. I'll say this again. You can raise the minimum wage to 15, but the minimum wage is always zero if you can't get a job. And stigmatized communities, that's us, have been locked out of, the private sector has never treated stigmatized communities at fair working conditions and wages. So, like, I don't understand why we think the minimum wage is gonna do everything for us. It might actually just get us replaced. So I'm for raising the minimum wage, but I'm also for like a federal job guarantee at $22 an hour. And we should talk about paycheck supports for companies that can't, pay their people and still keep the prices low on their goods, right? So in Europe, for the COVID relief, the government's backstocking many, many companies' paychecks, 70%, 80%. Right, so if we did that here, it would look like instead of subsidizing farms through subsidizing the owners, we subsidize farms by subsidizing their paychecks, the farm workers, right? So the farm owners need to only pay $6, $7 an hour, but the government will kick in, tax ahead fund guys will kick in the extra, 18, right? And so that way we get the work, but the people who are doing the work are paid, right? This isn't a crazy, this is like we have agriculture subsidies. We just have structured them for the people who aren't black. As opposed to we have subsidies. We just structure them for people like who aren't like working poor. So a poor people's campaign is going to be like, all right, so we have these same subsidies for this industry, except let's run it through the workers' paychecks as opposed to running it through the owners' coffers. Right? They do it in Europe. Paycheck supports, especially since they laid off so many people in COVID. We could do it here. And that way, we keep the goods and services, but we pay the workers that actually make the goods and services. Right? So you work in the United States and you do that with a guaranteed job, then we have some very interesting labor dynamics. We have some very interesting labor dynamics. So, Barber, not specific enough about the asks, not negative enough about his willingness to take the Poor People's Campaign willingness to frustrate the aspirations of company Democrats or anybody who gets in the way of black people and self-determination. We have to be willing to frustrate their aspirations. We can't just like this has to be about power. We can't just wag our fingers. It has to be about power. You secure us these jobs, or we will make you lose. If you're not talking in those terms, then you're just wasting time. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. You're trying to be moral with sociopaths. They'll understand power, and then maybe their kids will understand their goodness, but you need to talk in terms of power if you want political goods. And if you want to be relevant. Right? So the Poor People's Campaign needs to talk about power, needs to talk about jobs, and not just getting rid of bad stuff, but actually saying, as a matter of right, you are not free in America unless you are secured a good job at a fair wage with a fair say in your working conditions. That means like vacations and all of that stuff. Like I want to be treated like a white employee. then, you know, and 401ks and all of that, right? So, and that's a matter of right, because without that economic security, you don't have political independence. You're always scared of keeping your mouth shut for the fear of losing your job. Right, so you need economic security in order to have political independence. And since we're not serious about economic security, we're not serious about actually a self-determining black people. Right, and so I hope this has been educational. I hope someone talks to Barber about power, he has to talk about making people lose, not just what he's for, but what he's going to do to the people who are against what he's for and what the movement can do to them. It's got to be able to frustrate their aspirations, because if you're not doing that, then you're just wasting air and everyone's time, and nobody takes you seriously. They'll invite you to talk to a prayer breakfast and then go talk to bankers who they actually take seriously. What's going on? I'm just getting water. One of my kids is coming in. All right, so reframe the movement around power. Redefine poverty as opposed to just material sustenance, but around empowerment. And and reframe it around empowerment. And you actually have to be positive about the conditions of power, which means a federal job guarantee, and that'll include healthcare and everything else. And I think legal care for all, because we're a nation of laws, and if you don't have access to a lawyer, then you're just some man's boy, because they can do anything because they have access to a lawyer, and we're a nation of laws, right? So I think you need legal care for all. You think you need a federal job guarantee, but mostly you need to think about poverty in terms of not material sustenance, but the ability to exercise rights on a par with others. Because make no mistake, when white people think about missing half a meal, they're rioting. They're taking over the Capitol just because an election might not have gone the way they wanted to sometimes. Maybe. we need to not just talk about poverty as in terms of being hungry. We need to talk about poverty as in terms of slights, about like someone slighting our dignity such that we will burn this place down if we are not treated like whole Americans. And all of that entails, and all of what that entails. And that we're willing to be hurt publicly and also hurt in order to be treated appropriately. And if you're not talking in those terms, then the other people won't take you seriously. Because they only deal with people in those terms. Are you going to frustrate my aspirations? Oh, no? Well, then, well, you just keep talking, Pastor. You just keep it moving, preacher. I have a next meeting to go to with someone who I actually am worried about. Right? So, thank you for your time. Kick over to www.funkyacademic.com if you like what I'm saying and you think I should keep saying it, which I should, and you should. And, spread this video to your friends. Peace. As I'm giving you the quality of political knowledge and insight that will help you not squander your life and kind of rescue meaning from it, then go ahead and go to www.funkyacademic.com and kick in $5, $15, or $50 a month, or make one enormous donations. I like the monthlies because it allows me to budget more, and that'll help me, with a marketing budget, for getting better equipment that works all the time, because in a lot of ways, freedom means having equipment that works every time you turn it on. And I want to be a free Negro. So if you like what I do, go to funkyacademic.com and contribute. Thanks often comes in the form of cash. And the site takes credit cards.